Log entry. Day 74 of the Deep Exploration mission. The cabin glows tonight in its familiar amber, a pool of warmth held against the endless dark. My desk, as always, is set for the ritual. Journal, pen, and a cup of tea whose steam curls upward like a ghost of earth. The hum of the ship settles into me as though it were my own pulse, constant and patient. Outside, beyond the viewport, a faint haze waits at the edge of sight. It is not a star, nor a planet, nor even the scattered lights of a cluster. It is broader, softer, spread across the black like breath across glass. The instruments call it dust, interstellar particles gathered into a drifting cloud. But to the eye, it is something else entirely, a nebula, silver and delicate, a veil unfurling across the cosmos. I sip my tea slowly, letting its warmth anchor me, and write, approaching a silver dust nebula. Appearance, faint, shimmering. Coordinates logged. The words look small compared to the sight beyond, but the atlas is built of such lines, and each is a thread in the tapestry of the mission. The ship hums a little differently tonight. Not louder, not strained, only aware, as though it too recognizes the presence ahead. Dust does not trouble its course, not at this distance, yet the anticipation hums through the metal in a way I can almost feel against my skin. I lean closer to the viewport. The haze thickens as the ship drifts forward. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Stars behind it blur slightly, their sharp outlines softened, their colors tinted faintly silver. It feels like the universe has drawn a curtain across itself, and I am being invited to step through. The nebula is not yet around me, but its presence has already filled the cabin. The glow from outside spills faintly across the desk, brushing the paper with a sheen that makes ink gleam darker than usual. My hand lingers over the page, as though the pen itself needs to slow to match the calm unfolding beyond the glass. I remember mists on Earth, autumn mornings where fog gathered over rivers, winter dawns where frost turned the air to breath made visible. This nebula reminds me of those moments. Not a wall, not a boundary, but an embrace. It is strange to find something so earthly here among stars that have never known clouds or rivers. And yet the memory rises unbidden, comforting, as though the cosmos itself has chosen to echo the small beauty of home. I describe it for the atlas. Appearance resembles terrestrial mist, diffuse glow, silvery hue, light scattering in fine gradients, resembles breath across window glass. I wonder who will read these lines one day. Perhaps they will imagine it differently, or perhaps they too will see mists when they look upon it. That is the gift of the atlas. Not only facts, but the threads of wonder passed from one traveler to another.
The tea cools in my hand, but I hardly notice. My eyes are fixed on the soft haze outside, growing clearer with each passing moment. The nebula is no longer a suggestion. It is a presence, waiting with the patience only space can hold. I let silence reign for a while. the hum of the ship, the faint crackle of instruments, the slow turning of thought. These become the orchestra that prepares the way. The nebula glows, silver dust drifting across eternity, and I am carried toward it, steady, unhurried, grateful. The ship drifts on, steady as breath, and the haze outside grows thicker until it ceases to be a haze at all. It becomes the air of the voyage, the texture of the view, the canvas on which every star must now be painted. The moment I cross the threshold is subtle. There is no jolt, no tremor, only a gradual softening, as though the universe has placed a veil over its own light. Stars lose their sharpness, their edges wrapped in silver glow. Distances blur. The vastness remains, but it feels closer now, enfolded in luminous fog. I write, entering dust field, nebula light, diffuse, silvery with faint blue hues. Star field softened, no immediate interference with navigation. The words are measured, factual, yet my hand slows as though reluctant to break the silence. Through the viewport, the nebula gathers itself into motionless swirls. Dust particles, unseen individually, reveal themselves in collective shimmer. They bend the starlight, refracting it into gradients that drift across the cabin. A pale band of silver slides along the wall. My hands glow faintly blue as I hold them up. The journal page gleams like parchment caught in candlelight.
The cabin itself feels transformed. Light no longer falls in direct lines, but in softened rays, as though the lamp at my desk has blended with the nebula outside. Even the shadows are gentler, their edges blurred, their presence less insistent. I imagine I am sitting not in a machine of alloy and circuits, but in a lantern, fragile glass holding a single flame adrift in infinite mist. The instruments register faint static, a whisper in the sensors as dust brushes against the ship's awareness. But the systems remain calm, every reading steady. There is no harm here, only presence. I lean closer, fingertips against the viewport, watching as faint specks flash briefly when caught in the right angle of starlight. They resemble snowflakes suspended in slow motion, each one glimmering before vanishing again into the whole. I remember walking through fog on Earth, the way sound would change, how footsteps dulled, voices softened, horizons vanished into pale absence. This nebula carries the same hush, not silence, but softened presence, a world remade by diffusion. Even here, across gulfs unimaginable, the memory of that hush returns, as though the cosmos wishes me to remember. The ship moves deeper. The haze thickens into a silver ocean. Light scatters in every direction, bending into soft rainbows so faint they seem imagined. I write again for the atlas. Nebula light diffused, softening of shadows, scattered iridescence, comparable to terrestrial mist. The entry looks small compared to the experience, but it is the best a pen can do. Time slows, or perhaps it only feels that way. Hours may pass, or minutes. But in this silver dust, the measure of time is less certain. The ship hums on, patient and unhurried, and I with it. I close my eyes for a moment and let the light fall across me without need of sight. I can feel its presence in the air, a quiet shimmer that does not touch the skin but fills the mind. I imagine that the nebula has stories, each speck of dust a remnant of something once whole, fragments of stars long vanished, scattered seeds awaiting new suns. To drift here is to sit among the ashes of brilliance, waiting for their next beginning. When I open my eyes again, the nebula is everywhere. The void has been replaced by a sea of glow, shifting gently, refusing any boundary. I am within it now, and it within me. The atlas will record coordinates and density, but this page will hold something else, the memory of drifting through a silver ocean of dust, carried without resistance, held without demand. The nebula folds around the ship, layer upon layer of shimmer. What seemed at first a haze proves richer, alive with variation. Some regions are thin, the dust stretched like silk across the dark. Others thicken into luminous rivers, slow currents where light scatters more brightly, as though the void itself were streaming with silver water. I guide the ship gently, letting its path bend toward the denser glow. No thrust is needed, only patience, only the willingness to drift where the dust invites. The instruments note increased particle density, but nothing dangerous. Shields absorb what little contact occurs. A faint brushing, too subtle for more than a murmur in the data. I smile softly, relieved. The nebula is not hostile, it is welcoming. The viewport is a canvas of motionless brilliance. Tiny specks catch light and hold it, suspended like diamonds adrift in invisible currents. Some flash for only a moment, then vanish into the greater glow. Others remain, steady points of shimmer, companions for the slow orbit of my eyes. I write in the atlas, interior of nebula resembles ocean of suspended crystals. Density variations form luminous streams, suggestive of rivers or currents. Visual effect, dreamlike, painterly, calming. I linger over the word calming. Science may not require it, but the atlas does. This is not only a record of what is, but how it feels to be here. As the ship drifts deeper, colors emerge. At first faint, then undeniable. The dust scatters starlight into hues, soft blues along one stream, pale violets across another, even hints of rose where particles shift in composition. It is like sailing through twilight seas lit by unseen lanterns, each ribbon of color a path through the silence.
I imagine a world orbiting within such a cloud. What skies would its people know? Mornings of silver dawn, nights where the stars were veiled in mist, days where the light scattered endlessly across oceans. Every horizon would glow softly, every shadow would blur. They would grow accustomed to beauty so constant it might seem ordinary. I envy them the possibility. The cabin shares in this transformation. The silver light seeps through the viewport, softening every surface. My desk glimmers faintly,
the pen catching hints of violet. Even my hands look borrowed from a dream, their edges blurred by scattered light. I sip the last of my tea, cool now, and it too carries the shimmer, steam rising silver in the glow before it vanishes. I close my eyes to imagine more clearly. The dust is not lifeless. It is history. Atoms forged in stars, scattered in deaths long past, waiting now to become part of something new. Perhaps one day these ducks will gather into worlds, into skies, into the breath of travelers not yet born. For now, they drift, and I with them, witnesses to one another. I add a final note for the atlas. Nebula dust ancient, remnants of stars, atmosphere dreamlike, presence felt as gentle embrace. Psychological effect, peace, suspension of time. The pen rests. The ship continues. The nebula holds. I drift deeper still, not into distance, but into stillness, into the certainty that this moment will not fade from me, even when the silver glow is behind.
The deeper I drift, the softer the world becomes. The nebula folds around me like a great silence, luminous yet hushed, infinite yet close. Its silver light does not blind, does not demand. It soothes, as though the universe itself has taken on the shape of calm. I think of impermanence. Every particle of dust around me once belonged to something vast, a star born, lived, and gone, its brilliance scattered across eternity. These are its remnants, not ashes but seeds, waiting for the day they will gather again, drawn into new suns, new worlds. Tonight they are dust, tomorrow they may be skies. To witness them in this state between what was and what will be is to rest within the universe's breath. The whispers of earth return to me, mist over rivers in early dawn, fog drifting through valleys at night, candlelight softened by haze. I remember standing still in those mists, wrapped not in silence, but in gentleness. This nebula feels the same, not empty, not cold, but filled with presence. Even in distance, I am not alone. I set my pen to the page once more. Nebula represents transition, dust between stars, past into future, resonance of impermanence, effect upon observer, gratitude, peace, quiet wonder. The atlas will carry those words, though they are only fragments of what the soul feels here. The hum of the ship continues, steady, anchoring. It is the heartbeat of the voyage, unchanged by dust or silence. Around it, the glow wraps the hull, brushing against metal as though acknowledging our passage. I imagine the nebula recognizing me, not by name, but by presence, an observer added briefly to its history. My eyes grow heavy, lulled by the shimmer. The stars beyond blur, veiled by silver mist. Time loses its meaning, but peace replaces it. I feel as though I could drift here forever. The ship, a lantern in endless fog. The journal, a memory written in light. I set down my pen gently, so the ink will not smudge. The lamp glows faintly, but most of the light in the cabin now belongs to the nebula. I whisper into the hush, thank you, not to anyone, but to this moment, for allowing me to be within it. End of log. The ship hums, the silver dust glows, and I rest, held in the nebula's quiet embrace.